It is currently 4:16 a.m. at the time I'm making this video. And you're probably asking to yourself, JT, why the hell are you up at 4:16 a.m.? Well, I just got done playing NCAA 14. I was in dynasty mode and I was doing my conference realignments, moving USC and UCLA from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten. And it got me thinking, what's up with these supposed to be mega conferences slash super conferences that are coming to college football? What are they? How's this thing going to work? Because let's be honest, I don't know, you don't know, and these commissioners probably don't even know how this thing is going to work. So in this video, I wanted to take some time to give you guys my thoughts on how I think these mega conferences are going to work and how they're going to impact the future of college football. So when you think of this era of college football, it's definitely not the era that the majority of you guys grew up with. A lot of you guys probably been watching this sport since the 80s, the 90s, and the early 2000s. But now with this new era, I call it the Money in the Bank era. Because with these NIL deals, you have all these teams now joining new conferences. The whole reason for all this is to gain more money, which is why I call it the Money in the Bank era. And for all my wrestling fans out there, you guys know what the Money in the Bank ladder match is. You have a bunch of wrestlers in the ring, you have a ladder, and all these wrestlers are competing, trying to climb the top of the ladder to get that Money in the Bank briefcase. Now, what's in that briefcase is a contract that allows them to cash in anytime against the defending champion. So it looks as if all these conferences, all these players predominantly are making their decisions based off money. So that's how we're in the stage that we're at right now with these super conferences now starting to form. So how many teams are going to be in these proposed mega conferences? Many people think there's going to be at least 20 teams. And some people think there can be as many as 30 teams in these conferences. Now, there's probably only going to be 3 super conferences. It's probably going to be the Big Ten, the SEC, and most likely the Big 12 is going to be the third. So if you have 20 teams in these conferences, you're probably going to have 5 teams in 4 different divisions. And I think that the winner of each division is going to potentially end up competing in a inter-conference playoff. And it's going to be similar to how, if you watch college basketball, they have the conference tournaments. So whoever wins these inter-conference playoffs are going to end up winning the conference championship plus an automatic bid in the expanded college football playoffs. Now, we already know that the college football playoffs is heading to being expanded. We don't know how many teams. It could be 8, it could be 12. But if you're somebody who is against college football playoff expansion, it doesn't really matter what you think, because at this point, this thing is about to get expanded. So how is this going to affect bowl games? Okay, how's this going to affect the Rose Bowl tie-in? Because you already know with the Rose Bowl, the winner of the Big Ten always matches up against the winner of the Pac-12. So are we going to potentially see these bowl games start sponsoring these conference championship games? Are we going to have the SEC Orange Bowl championship game or the Vizio Big Ten championship game? So I'm really interested in seeing how bowl games get affected by this, because by expanding the college football playoffs and making these conferences so large, we can only expect that maybe the regular season may get reduced a little bit. And that probably is going to result in us maybe having less bowl games to watch. And it's funny because a lot of people have been asking, how's this going to affect bowl games? And a lot of people are really upset that we potentially could end up having less bowl games because of this. But what's crazy is, ironically, a year ago, some of these people were the same people on Twitter saying how we have too many bowl games that nobody cares about. Meaningless bowl games, right? But now all of a sudden, these meaningless bowl games are in jeopardy of being erased, and now everybody all of a sudden is all concerned. Funny how that works. So when you look at the future of college football, it's going to be really interesting because pretty much it's going to be similar to the NFL. You know, in the NFL, you have the AFC and you have the NFC, and you have 16 teams per conference. So by having these big super mega conferences, you're probably not going to have many out of conference games, which may be a good or a bad thing depending on how you look at it. Because from a bright side, maybe we won't see Alabama facing off against, one of these FCS schools, one of these no-name FCS programs that they just put on the schedule. They paid them a lot of money to blow them out. We won't see Alabama facing off against Duke anymore, hopefully. So you're going to get more competitive games, in my opinion, because now you're going to have a little bit more parity. Think about it. If you have 20 teams in every conference, right? And you have the Alabamas going against the Texases, and you have the Ohio States going against the USCs of the world, you're going to have more competitive games. You're not going to have Alabama now just easily being able to decimate every single body they play. And that's what a lot of people have been asking for. They've been asking for parity. Now, you make it a little bit more difficult for Alabama to continue to have the level of success that they have been having for well over a decade. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to be a guarantee, but it's going to make it a little bit more harder. However, even though the regular season is going to be a little bit more different and a little bit more difficult in terms of quality opponents in your conference, you're still going to have some teams that's going to be there that aren't going to be good. Let's face it, Vanderbilt most likely is still going to be in the SEC, so you're still going to have some cupcake schools in these conferences that schools like Alabama or USC are going to be able to beat up on. However, you do have a good chance that you're going to have a difficult regular season for these schools because now you're going to have way more teams and maybe way more competition in these conferences. And you guys can interject in the comment section and put your thoughts on how you guys think this will work also, because I'm interested in seeing you guys' thoughts about this. But another thing is this. Even though you're going to have the chance of having a little bit more parity, in the college football playoffs, if this thing gets expanded, let's see, you have auto bids, but yet you're still going to have some spots where you're going to have a committee that's going to decide, okay, now that we have the auto bids out the way, who's going to end up getting the non-auto bids? And they're going to have to be able to pick from there. Now, with these auto bids, it looks as if, let's say we have a 12-team college football playoff, right? The conference championship winners are automatically going to be included, but are they automatically going to get the top seeds? Are they automatically going to get the luxury of having a bye or being able to host a at-home first-round playoff game? Because think about it. What if we end up having a 9-3 Big Ten champion, and yet we have a 12-0 or undefeated SEC champion? Is that 9-3 Big Ten champion going to end up getting one of the higher seeds just because they won their conference? Or are they just going to automatically get an automatic bid, but there's no guarantee that they're going to be able to get one of those high seeds? You see, that's where some of my questions lie with these whole expanded mega conferences. Because if you expand these conferences, you're going to have a higher chance of maybe not having so many undefeated teams like you would have in the past. And with that, you may have some 3-loss teams that are in the college football playoffs. And how are you going to properly see that? You get what I'm saying? How are you going to make the argument and say that, Ohio State won the Big Ten, they're 9-3, they deserve to have a at-home first-round playoff game? You get what I'm saying? It's kind of weird. And it only makes sense that if it goes that way, that we kind of steal from the NFL model. The best team that has the best record gets the number 1 seed, and then the team with the second best record ends up getting the number 2. However, you do automatically get in if you do win your conference championship game, right? However, the conference champions that have the best record. So let's say you have a undefeated UCF, right? They will get the number 1 seed. And then if you have Ohio State team that has 2 losses, they'll probably get the 2nd seed. And then the 3rd seed will probably be the team that has more losses. And then you'll go from there. And then you'll have your at-large bids, which are the bids for the teams who didn't quite frankly were able to win their conference championships. They would end up getting those games. And also, another question that I have is, what's going to happen to the G5, right? Because it looks as if the ACC is about to be the next conference that ends up getting rated like the Pac-12 just did. So with these G5 schools, they're probably going to end up getting some offers from some of these bigger conferences, and they're going to end up moving there. But how are they going to fold into the mix? Because let's face it, G5 schools already have a really tough road of being able to get into the college football playoffs. Cincinnati got in just because they were fortunate enough to have a schedule that was good enough to hold up, and they were also able to hold up their end of the bargain. But by having these 12-team playoffs, are you going to have to automatically give a auto bid to a G5 school? Because I think it's only fair that you do, because you have so many teams, you have to give one to them, right? But the problem with that is that, yeah, people are going to applaud that. But here's the thing. A lot of people have to realize that you don't have a G5 school that is as good as a 2017 UCF or a 2021 Cincinnati or a 2011 Boise State. G5 schools that are that good at being able to compete with some of the best schools in college football only come every once in a while. You don't see these teams pop up every single season, which is why when they do, we're so enamored by them and we're so interested in seeing how they hold up against some of the big boys. What if there comes a year where we end up having a 9-4 G5 school? They probably won't be all that competitive. But, a lot of people just want to see it just because they deserve opportunity, which I agree. However, how is that going to factor into this new expanded college football playoffs? And at this point, some of the better G5 schools are probably going to end up getting sucked up by some of these super conferences. We already saw what happened with Houston, UCF, BYU, and Cincinnati going to the Big 12. So what's going to happen with the Boise States of the world? Are they going to end up getting picked up by the Big 10 or the Big 12 or the SEC? Because you're going to have some bottom feeders in these conferences. And these conferences are trying to target, some of these big market teams. So if you're looking at a school like Boise State, are they even worth adding? Even though they do have a pretty big fan base, they do take football really serious up there in Idaho. So it's just a lot of questions and a lot of gray area when it comes to these mega conferences / super conferences in college football. It's like we think that we're going to end up having the NFL model. But if you end up having the NFL model, then that means that you're probably going to end up having less bowl games. Are we going to end up having play-in games where we end up having a low-seeded G5 school end up having to play a higher-ranked Power 5 school to get into the college football playoffs? Are we going to end up having 2 G5 schools who end up competing in their own, conference championship playoffs things, right? So what if, because with 20 teams in the Big 12, the Big 10, and the SEC, there's going to end up being a couple of conferences who aren't going to be that large. Or maybe you do have some G5 schools that do end up having maybe 15 or 20 G5 schools. Are they going to end up having their own G5 playoffs where you take the G5 schools from those respective conferences and you have the championship winners who automatically go against each other in their own little playoffs? And then the winner automatically gets an auto bid into the new expanded college football playoffs. Like, I know for a lot of you guys, this probably isn't making sense, but let's be honest. With the way that college football is right now, none of this crap really makes sense. And really all we can do is speculate. So when it comes to the future of college football, Listen, it's the money in the bank era. It's all about trying to get the cash. It's all about trying to get the bag. And for these conferences, they don't really care about their tradition anymore. And with new fans like me, well, I wouldn't really call myself new because I have been watching college football for well over a decade, but I'm only 20 years old. So the new fans of college football, or the newer generation that's around my age that's watching this, they don't really care all that much about the tradition. They don't care about the rivalries that you grew up watching in the 80s and 90s with your grandpa and your dad. You know, we have been born on the college football playoff era. Now, I'm not speaking for everybody because I'm pretty sure there's a good majority of people around my age who care about the tradition of being able to preserve it. But there's many people that I've talked to, my friends who watch college football, who said that they don't really care. You get what I'm saying? They're just excited as I am to see how this all unravels. And really, you got to ask yourself, right? I mean, what conferences are going to end up taking the biggest hits because of these new mega conferences? What's going to happen to the Pac-12 losing USC and UCLA and potentially Oregon, Colorado, Washington, Utah? Those teams could end up leaving. Are they going to end up getting San Diego State, Boise State, and trying to preserve their conference? Are they just going to end up being demoted to a G5 conference? You know, the future of college football right now is really shaky. It's a really big mystery. It's a lot of uncertainty, right? And listen, I love surprises, but I only love them on my birthday and on Christmas. And a lot of people right now, we don't really know the direction that this sport is heading. Well, let me take that back. We know the direction that this is heading. It's going to be really similar to the NFL model. And at this point, with these student athletes, you know, are they really going to be considered student athletes at this point? Or are they still going to be viewed as scholarship athletes when they're making $1 million off NIL? And what about G5? You know, it's going to be hard for recruits to want to go to a G5 school anymore because at this point, what's the point of playing in the G5? You're not going to get that much off NIL deals. Listen, I go to Florida Atlantic University, which just moved to the American Athletic Conference. And I was talking to a lot of football players, and I asked them, hey, man, if a school like Alabama came up to you, offered you a good amount of money off an NIL deal, would you transfer from FAU? You know what they said? They said, hell yeah. So with these G5 schools, you're going to have some of their best players end up leaving the conference just because they want to go play with the big boys and they want to get more money, more revenue in their pocket. And I'll never fault anybody for that. But, you know, college football right now is kind of a mess. And I do love chaos, but at the same time, you know, I still respect the tradition and the pageantry of college football. I respect what makes college football. And a lot of people counter that argument with saying, you know, JT, at the end of the day, when the games kick off, you're still going to be watching college football. You're still going to be watching college football teams. And you do have a point about that. However, we respect the bowl games. I love bowl season. I love watching 120 million bowl games every single year. And I watch them all. I watch the Cheez-Its Bowl. I watch the Mayo Bowl. They literally got a bowl game called Mayonnaise. I watch the Dollar Tree Bowl, the Dollar General Bowl, the Outback Bowl, the Russell Athletic Bowl. I love these bowl games. And it kind of hurts me that the fact that there's a potential that these bowl games, half of them are going to get wiped out. And that's really what makes me so in love with the sport of college football, is because in December, that's where the NFL season starts to come to a conclusion. And despite the fact that there's not as much football on anymore on Saturdays, I can tune in on a random night during December on Wednesday and watch Toledo versus the University of Virginia in the Cheez-Its Bowl. So for me, I'm kind of a little bit hurt that, you know, maybe bowl games are probably going to be in jeopardy because of this. But maybe they're going to end up having something where they have, you know, like some conference challenge games in college basketball really early on. They have like conference challenges when you have the Big Ten matched up against the Pac-12 in a little tournament? Are we gonna have, little smaller college football playoffs where we have like 4 teams and then they just end up competing for the Reese's championship and end up winning the Reese's Bowl championship and they get a little trophy from it? So I don't really know, man, but if you made it to this point in the video, thank you. I appreciate you for watching. Make sure that you check out the JT Sports Podcast. Available on all podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. Make sure that you also like the video, subscribe to the channel for more NFL videos and content, and thanks for watching.